What's going on, people? Happy Sunday night. We are back with our regularly scheduled hour of talking TV content. And I am joined by, once again, the soon-to-be-married Kristen, a.k.a. Miss Filmingo. Don't worry, I'll definitely start including your last name at some point as well once we,
That's okay.
I'll get it eventually, It's
You'll
just that,
get it.
like, it's just easier for me to use, like, the first names as well,
It's
But we're here to
easy.
talk.
It's
It is.
Kristen.
Exactly. But we're here to talk about a very, very special movie because this is the movie not only that kicks off our fall/Oscar season, we're beginning the wrap up of 2023. It's been a very interesting year. It's been a very tumultuous year, but it's been a fun year, I can say the least. I think it's safe to say I've had definitely more fun this year than any of the first 3 years of the 2020s. Not when it comes to podcasting, when it comes to movies, I've had more fun than any of the previous couple of years. And we're talking about a very special movie because not only is this movie the kickoff for the fall season, but it is also the first movie that we have ever seen together.
Yes.
We saw this movie together in Lincoln Center this past Friday, but we waited a week in order to do it so that we could do the 200th podcast. This is officially the 201st podcast. And Kristen, what movie are we talking about tonight?
Dumb Money.
Yes.
And get your chicken tendies. That's all I can say.
Get your
it's gonna
chicken
be a good
tendies.
conversation.
Get your diamonds. Where my pussy at? You guys will get all of those references once you see the movie. All that and more on tonight's episode of the Talking TV podcast. Kristen, what's going on? Happy to have you back on the podcast again.
So happy to be back.
Afterwards.
So happy to be back. And it's 201. Not just
201. That's right. Oh, man. I just want to talk about the 200th podcast for a second there because, oh, man, that was such a blast. Thanks again so much to you and Matt coming on. And thanks to all the guests that came on. Like, you guys really, not only did you guys kill it so much harder than I could have and made that podcast so much more special and so much more awesome than I could have possibly have asked for. Like, man, it was a good fucking show. It was
a good show. I mean, it's a huge congratulations and achievement to you. You worked so hard. You and Chris, even starting out in the beginning, worked tremendously hard, and watching you grow as a person and just connecting. It was amazing to be a part of. You had some really great guests like Joe. You had not Joe, Sean.
Sean, the other half.
The other half of the guy
in the movies podcast. Yeah, no, yes. We had Sean, we had Eli, we had Dustin, we had Nathaniel, we had Joe, aka Big J, aka YOLO. He's got like 3 different names. I love it.
It's so hard to keep up with them because I'm like, wait,
it's Mac. You and Mac, where we just talked about like Saw X, and we just let Mac go off on the Saw franchise for like 5 minutes. It was great.
Mac loves the Saw franchise, and if he could, he loves to stick his 2 cents on that.
I
love that.
I'm still not sure because I want to do like a Shocktober themed, like a horror themed episode to end Halloween. I'm not sure if it's going to be Five Nights at Freddy's or Saw X, but I think Saw X actually opens this weekend, so we may have missed the boat. But I wanted to do Saw X just because we haven't done a crappy horror movie in a minute, and
it could be The Exorcist. That's going to happen in October.
But The Exorcist, I'm hoping, is actually good. But I mean, which I don't have a lot of hope for it because, David Gordon Green, I'm sorry, that I was not a fan of those Halloween movies that he did. I really wasn't. But Exorcist, I will admit, they do have good trailers. They do. Those trailers are good.
What do you mean? You don't like Evil Dies Tonight?
No, I am not. I am not a fan of Evil Dies Tonight. I am not a fan of any of that movie in particular. Halloween Kills is one of the worst movies I've ever seen. Like, how do you get worse than fucking Halloween H2O or Resurrection? How is that possible?
No.
How are you worse than Rob Zombie? How do you make a worse movie than that?
I don't know. And to be fair, we should also put Danny McBride into the mix as well because he's the one who helped write the screenplays.
I really don't know what happened with those guys and what they were doing because if you watch their The Righteous Gemstones, their show on HBO, that show could not be more perfect, and that show gets better and better with each season. So like, I don't know what happened. I really don't. But
studios.
But we're not here to talk about bad horror movies. We're saving that. We got that in a month, starting with Shocktober. We're here to wrap up September, and we wrapped up. September was kind of a little bit of a different one. We were originally supposed to have a bunch of movies that were set to open this month that then got delayed because of the strike. Challengers was delayed until April of next year, and Poor Things was delayed until September. So we ended up doing a couple of cross collaborations. Myself and Nathaniel Ahart.
September.
No, December. Yeah, so they sound similar enough. what's it called? Myself and Nathaniel A. Hart did a couple of collaborations. We talked about the works of Hayao Miyazaki. We did our Martin Scorsese Hall of Fame. Dustin and I just did our next installment in our Actors Hall of Fame with Paul Dano. But we are here to kick off the fall season with a movie that I feel like is going to fly under people's radars. But it's also a movie that, like, it's been weird. I feel like this is a movie that, like, the studio hasn't exactly known how to market, where this is arguably, like, in any other year, like, the perfect Oscar movie in a weird way. It's got a big ensemble cast. It's, like, perfectly sews the line between drama and comedy. It's about a big, pressing, relevant issue that doesn't feel forced and shoved in your face. It's not like it's not a finger wagging message movie. It's just like a good, solid, entertaining movie. And that movie is Dumb Money, which is a movie that, when I initially made me groan, because obviously after the whole GameStop short squeeze bubble that happened, obviously back in February of 2021, when we were all kind of stuck in lockdown and COVID. After that thing happened, it's such a crazy event that we witnessed in real time, that apparently they were like already, you know, we heard that, like, okay, there were already like 13 scripts being written and that the studios were pitching them. And I immediately, my first instinct was, I just groaned. I'm like, okay, of course they're going to ruin this somehow. But a weird thing happened where enough time passed. Like, it had been like that. Like, I heard about that news right back in spring of 2021, and a lot of time has passed since then. So when the trailer for this movie, I don't remember when it first premiered, if it was the spring or the summer, and it may have even been as recently as fall of last year. But whenever this trailer dropped, and they had like an actual like good marketing campaign, like the way that they marketed it, it was very fast paced. It was very frenetic. It actually like got me engaged. You know, the cast is phenomenal, like really good. And then I saw that Craig Gillespie was directing, and I'm not going to say that Gillespie is one of my favorite directors right now. He certainly had a very, very interesting track record as a filmmaker, both on film and TV. But to me, like, he really hadn't had like a straight surefire like win since I, Tonya, really. You know, he directed the pilot of Physical. He had directed a couple of episodes of Pam and Tommy, as well as directing all the episodes of that Mike Tyson Hulu show that came and went last year. He directed the Cruella de Vil live action Disney remake, which people said was like good, but at that point I'm like, yeah, I'm not watching any Disney live action remakes. And just his career before I, Tonya, had been so strange, where you had him directing Mr. Woodcock, Lars and the Real Girl, the Fright Night remake, The Finest Hours with Casey Affleck and Chris Pine, that Disney
The $1 Million Arm with John Hamm.
Like, what a weird career. And it's like, I feel like part of the reason why I kind of didn't get the attention it deserved is because nobody saw it coming, really. And in a weird way, I think he's kind of pulled it off again, because you have this movie here, Dumb Money, which we're going to get into, but just in terms of like, you have this movie that basically to me is like the spiritual successor of The Social Network and The Big Short. It's based off the Ben Mesrick novel. Ben Mesrick is also the author of The Social Network that was written shortly after the events that happened in 2021. And now you have this movie that comes out, and it's kind of, in a weird way, like perfectly primed to kind of sweep Oscar season, or at least it would be in any other year. But I think they made the crucial mistake of release, and I think they realized that too, which is why you're seeing all this confusion around the release date, which is they were released at the end of September. When was the last time that a movie that was set to like potentially get some Oscar buzz released in September? Do you know?
Not really. I feel like it was an interesting campaign, to say the least, for the rollout for this film. I think it would have been better. I think their eyes were set on it to have multiple stars promoting it.
Right.
And doing as much as they can. And then the strike happened. And I think what Sony wanted to do, because they've had multiple changes with their release schedule as well, and this is the only Sony property that is available right now in theaters,
right?
At least of my knowledge, I think. But they did what they could to make some money right now, since we're in this little
weird phase, right? Renegotiations have started up again between the guilds and the AMPTP as of today. They are set to, you know, that whether they will be resolved or not will happen sometime within the next week or so. And yeah, and I don't know. I don't want to say that this movie was kind of already being set up to fail, but that's what it kind of feels like, you know. But then, you know, it opens at TIFF. It gets overwhelming, I feel like, positive reception, you know. But it's weird because I feel like the reviews, again, they were like ready to review bomb this, which to me makes no sense, because
I think they wanted to review bomb it because of the certain actors that are in it. I think like this was a movie that was almost shooting itself to be a not so great movie. When it's not, it's a
Right.
fantastic film.
Right. It's really good. It's really, really good. And like, I don't know why I almost fooled myself into thinking it wasn't going to be good because, I mean, maybe it was just because of like the timeliness of the subject matter and the fact that it's like, you know, it's a pressing relevant event. But I wasn't sure if it had been like, if it was like too soon, you know, because like you think about it, right? The Social Network opened up about, I feel like it's like previously it was always like an 8-year gap, you know, like the Social Network opened up like about like 8 years after the premiere, after Facebook really became a thing, which is about like early 2000s, 03, 04. Social Network premieres in 2010. The Big Short, right, covers the housing crisis that occurred between like 07, 08. So that's again about another about an 8-year gap, 7-year gap, just about.
7.
But it's only been 2 years. That's the thing. Like this all happened like recently. Like this covers events that happened from about what did they say this really started? Like what, June, July of 2020 when everyone was like in the middle of lockdown.
And then it was also based on a book that I guess was written so quickly.
Right. Like they hopped on this like instantly. And so I guess the fact that like it's felt like it's been so long since we first started hearing discussions about this movie and now it's here. I don't know. I'm chalking that up to just like how weird just and in a bubble and how just strange the passage of time has felt since we came out of COVID. And after that year of lockdown, you know, people always, you know, they keep making jokes about how it's like, oh, it's been like 5 years. COVID felt like 5 years all in one. And it's like, you know, and now we're like finally catching up to real time, you know? Like, it's like, I just turned 26 and there are certain days where I'm like, I still feel like I'm 24, but it's like, yeah, because like all of my mid 20s were just like shoved right into that weird, like 2-year span right there. But to have this movie, they originally it is set to open wide this weekend, and then they shift it to where they are going to open it limited and then open it wide the first weekend of October. I think it was originally set to open wide next weekend opposite the Creator. But then
there was like a whole situation that they did because it was also supposed to open nationwide the same day as Taylor Swift.
Right. Yes.
And then they, because it was like a slow rollout, like pretty much for the next 4 weeks until the Taylor Swift Eras tour was going to drop the same day. And then they pushed it to, you know, a week the same time as Exorcist.
Now they have it opening. Oh, it's Exorcist. I thought it was Killers of the Flower Moon was it was opening that weekend.
I don't think
the
so.
20th. I could be wrong, but I thought that's what that's what the targeted weekend they were looking at was.
Yeah, I want to double check on that and make sure. But I thought it was like a weird article like Deadline like talked about because it was like going back and forth. So the release date was the 20th. Okay, my bad.
Okay. I thought so. Yeah, because I remember seeing a thing of like Killers of the Flower Moon. I'm like, wow, soon you're going to see Martin Scorsese complaining about Taylor Swift knocking him out of theaters because her Eras concert movie is going to be one of the highest grossing movies of this year.
Yeah, I mean it's going to save some kind of the box office that's
going to be that's going to be the Top Gun / but everyone thought the Barbenheimer was going to be the movie event of the year. No, it's going to be the Taylor Swift Eras concert. At least for the fall. At least for the fall.
I'll be there. Don't worry.
The Taylor Swift Eras movie is going to outgross Aquaman 2, which might be the funniest. That might be the funniest.
It's very funny
for this fall. So let's talk about this movie. You know, we go in, right? We kind of have a vague idea of what it's about, right? It was one of those things where because it was happening in real time and because it's like one of those events where it's like finally like our generation, Gen Z was like fully aware and conscious of it. It's not like 9/11 where a lot of us were too young to really remember it, or like the housing crisis or the invention of Facebook where all those happened where we were still like, you know, we were kids, you know, we were aware of it, we were present of it, but we were really too young to really register just how important and how culturally impactful those events were going to be, you know? This is something that primarily all of us were adults for, you know, or at the very least, like we were witnessing at some time, you know, we were either in college or out of college at that point. We were all kind of in COVID lockdown. We were all reading about this event on the news because at the time there really wasn't that much else going on. And the fact that like all of this stuff was happening and the fact that it was being so widely reported on and not covered up in any way, shape, or form, it was just one of those things that kept just growing more and more and more bonkers as time went on. So in a way, this kind of set itself up perfectly to get a movie adaptation, you know, especially following on, this is the part where I feel like it takes more so after The Big Short than The Social Network, because The Big Short, part of what made that movie work so well is the fact that it is constantly reminding you at every single minute just how wild and bonkers and insane it is that the events that you're witnessing actually happen in real life, you know? It's almost like I don't want to say that that's the movie that like killed parody, but in a strange way, that is the kind of a movie where it's like, it's almost like truth is truly is stranger than fiction. And while I'm not going to say that this movie goes for that as well, I feel like this movie, it's a lot less comedic than I thought it was going to be. Like, it does have its fair share of funny moments, primarily which come from Pete Davidson, but a lot more of it, I feel like it's more so just about like this eclectic group of people that for the most part have no interaction with each other other than just these events that are online. And like, it's probably first things first that I can say about this movie is that it's probably the best movie so far that's been released that directly deals with events that happened because of COVID.
I agree. I've been trying to find a good COVID movie, that
There
explains,
really haven't been any.
or at least captures what the pandemic was like. That has been, there's documentaries that have been released, and people seeing wearing masks. Because I've seen a couple. There's a couple I could, say, like one of them is called Life Upside Down, which is like a Bob Odenkirk movie, which I recommend to no one. But but that like one was like a COVID movie, but nothing like this one captures, the elements of the vibes where, Pete Davidson's doing food delivery service because, everybody was getting their food delivered. People are going around wearing masks, people are doing stuff around, we see in the GameStop, in the mall where, all the other stores are closed. GameStop is the only one open. And, Anthony Ramos and Dane DeHaan are working in it. And Dane DeHaan is like being kind of a jerk, saying, you got to make sure you're wearing your mask, even if there's nobody in the store. It's like all these little things that capture and understand everyone's frustrations and everybody's like dealings with the pandemic.
To add to that as well, the America Ferrara character with her being the nurse and like dealing with everything on the front lines. And by then, like the immediacy factor of everybody needing to go to the emergency room and kind of died down, because I think this is about like late 2020 when things were like, there were like some semblance of control that had been reestablished. I think for me particularly the college setting, the COVID college setting was the most jarring and startling.
Yeah, because I feel like that would affected you the most because I was already in.
My thing was I had just graduated, and I wasn't in school at all for those 2 years. But I had heard horror stories about all my friends that still were in school and had to deal with all that stuff, deal with the virtual classes, deal with the masks on and everything, not being able to like leave your dorm halls for like certain periods of time and stuff like that, the quarantine, all that. But the biggest note to me was, and I like that the movie commented on it without like directly pointing it out, was the major disparities between like the more middle class people as opposed to the uber rich who like, they move their entire families down to Florida and rented out like entire fucking, basically timeshares for, just to enjoy themselves. I think that like the showing of the disparity was probably one of the absolute best.
Yeah, and you could see that with Seth Rogen's character. I want to make that clear.
Seth Rogen's character, Vincent D'Onofrio's character, Nick Offerman's character, they're kind of the three ringleaders and representatives of the Uber elite. You have Sebastian Stan in there as well as one of the co-founders of Robinhood as well, but because of how Robinhood is utilized, you really don't see them as much. It's mostly Rogen, D'Onofrio, and Offerman that are kind of the three headliners for it. And I think that that's an important detail to point out because because I feel like one of the biggest things that COVID, and specifically this time period during COVID, exposed was the major disparities that were occurring between the uber rich that could like kind of, again, obviously, everybody that like was talking about like having to film stuff during COVID was talking about how like, COVID really didn't affect the rich. I remember this is something that Jesse Armstrong talked about when they were filming season 3 of Succession, how they decided to just not acknowledge COVID because for characters that were at that level of social structure, COVID really didn't affect them. And you really saw that as opposed to the more regular middle class people who were kind of, again, forced to put up with all the regulations and deal with that. And again, it's a big part of this movie because this movie is all about, the idea of the little guy finally gaining some semblance of control back from the uber elites,
Right.
And you have large sections of this movie that are dedicated to, like, again, just because the elites just assume that they think they know how regular people operate, they really don't start to take any action until they realize just how much it's eating into their wallets. And I think the movie does it. I think the way that this movie demonstrates and the way that this movie shows it visually too, like, it gives you plenty of exposition in terms of, like, the explaining all the stocks and how that works and everything, but it's done in such a way that you don't feel like you're being, like, dumped over the head with exposition. Like you kind of feel like you're going along with it with the characters.
You're going along with a lot of people in this film between between the college girls, between America Ferrera, Paul Dano, who is our like the lead in the one story you may follow. There's so many supporting characters, and you see pretty much the challenges that they are having, and it just covers enough where you understand their frustrations and just enough to understand what's going on. It doesn't make you feel dumb while you're watching it too,
Pun
hence
intended.
pun
All
intended.
Right. Yeah. And like you said, it's also, I will say as well, it's one of the most interesting uses of an ensemble cast that I've seen in a movie in a while. Also just the fact that we haven't had this type of movie in so long. We used to have these movies all the time with these big, massive ensemble casts of primarily all movie stars. And we haven't had that, it feels like, in so long.
I will say, it feels like the cast where you're not so much this primarily cast, but like where you get a big cast where it's like a Wes Anderson movie where he can get everybody,
But everyone just kind of comes in to film their 5 seconds of screen time and then bounces, and like you don't really feel like there's any interaction. You don't really feel the synergy between the cast. That's why that's why I've been pointing out the massiveness of the ensemble cast that Wes Anderson has been putting together recently, but how it kind of feels like a lot of those guys are wasted. I didn't exactly feel this way for Oppenheimer, but I kind of did at points where, again, there's so many people in that movie, but the majority of that movie is focused so much on Cillian Murphy and Robert Downey Jr. that it feels like, the effectiveness of the cast is not well utilized. That's not at all the case for me here. I think that this is an ensemble cast where, even if there's not necessarily a lot of interaction between certain of the cast members, everybody kind of has their own isolated pockets in the story. The fact of how they're all kind of contributing and feeding into the story, which all kind of circulates around Paul Dano's character, it's what really makes it like interesting and fresh. And again, I feel like I do give a little bit of leeway and a little bit of a soft spot to movies that kind of remind me of movies that I really enjoyed growing up. Like I said, we used to get these types of movies all the time, and we don't really get them as much anymore. But it's also just the fact that I feel like it's done so well. And for the most part, I don't really think there's a bad performance in this movie.
No,
I really don't,
I was surprised how much I enjoyed Pete Davidson, because the last performance I really enjoyed from Pete Davidson was one of my favorite movies of 2020, which was The King of Staten Island. That was my favorite movie. And I was like, oh my God, this guy's going to go and do great things. Yeah. And then it's like,
Pete's been having a little bit of a paycheck last couple of years, where he's done a couple shows for Peacock. He did another semi-autobiographical show that was slightly more comedic in tone. He's been popping up in these blockbusters. He had the Suicide Squad. He had his cameo in Fast X. He got his Transformers voice part. He had the whole Kardashian thing last year. He's been cashing them checks. So it was definitely nice to see
Bodies last year.
Bodies, right. But he's been, but it's good to see that he's in a position now where he's kind of, finally starting to, challenge himself a little bit as an actor. But like I said, he's not the only one in this movie. Like I said, we've been talking about a lot, Seth Rogen, D'Onofrio, Nick Offerman, America Ferrera, Anthony Ramos, Dane DeHaan, who I don't think was included in any of the marketing. Even the two college girls portrayed by industry's
Myah'lha. I remember him getting cast, and I was like, "Oh, Dane DeHaan, this is great." But like, he wasn't featured in like the marketing with all the trailers. Like when they were listing off all the cast members, they didn't list him, and I'm like, why? Because it's not like he's just like a one-off cameo. He's not like a major part of the movie, but like he has a part. Yeah, he's with Anthony Ramos, like I mentioned earlier, in the GameStop, and it's just mostly the two of them the entire time with their scenes together. And, they do really well with each other. They show that work, dynamic.
Yeah. And I listen, it's so interesting how I related to different sects of the storyline. But I think that one affected me the hardest because that's kind of the setting that I was in around that time period. I remember in late 2020, early 2021, I had just started like selling cell phones like at Walmart. And like that setting, it wasn't exactly as like confined as GameStop was because, my Walmart, there were still like a decent amount of people like walking around and such. But yeah, it was definitely kind of very haunting. And when I realized, I'm like, wow, that was almost 3 years ago now, because we're coming up on 2024 relatively soon. We're ending September and we're almost into October now. And yeah, it's kind of crazy to me just like how long it's been since that time period. And certain elements of it still feel like it was yesterday, but it kind of all revolves around Paul Dano's character. who is kind of the character that is the epicenter of this movie, of this universe. He kicks events off, obviously, because he's the one that initially takes notice of the GameStop stock and how they can kind of inflate it, since Wall Street has kind of set that up to fail, you know? And yeah, there's a little bit of an FU element involved in there too, where it's like, yeah, we, you know, because obviously, you know, he works at this hedge fund, you know, you see a little bit, you know, I love, again, it's a thing that I just fucking wish they would put in every goddamn movie, which is, again, just a montage of no words that just shows the character going about their daily life. I feel like it should be a requirement. It should be a requirement that needs to be in the first act of every single movie ever made from here on out. If we don't get a sequence following around our main character and seeing them go through just a day in the life with little to no dialogue, it doesn't have, there can be dialogue, it doesn't have to be, but it's just, I cannot tell you the amount of movies that I've seen recently that don't even bother to have any kind of a scene like that. They just throw you right into the action. And it's so crucial and necessary to empathize with that character before we kind of go on this journey, because even though he's not as bad as awfully, as terribly bad, oh my God, I can't even think of the words of how to emphasize it, but he's not as worse off as some of the other characters that are like dealing with it in this movie. But it's the fact that we empathize with his character and we understand enough about and where his characters come from. You know, he's got that blue collar middle class background that I feel like a lot of people like us can relate to. You know, where
Right.
like he does well enough to support himself and his family, but he also at the same time is like he's not one of the uber rich billionaires. He's not. You know?
No, he's just an everyday schmo. He likes to go for his runs. He likes to hang out with his brother. He hangs with
Right.
his family. He does all the stuff that Paul
But like it's
character
important.
does, and you see it in
Character building.
building.
It's
Yeah.
it's character building. It's getting you invested in a person. You know, I remember The Big Short got a slight criticism because it was kind of putting a little bit of emphasis, too much emphasis on the event itself and rather the characters. And I personally,
Okay.
I mean, I kind of understand where people are coming from with that. I don't subscribe to it. I don't think that's true. I think the movie does a plentiful good job, especially with empathizing you to Bale and Carell's character.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, especially to
driving you
Bale's
through,
character.
you know, and then also in Witchrock and John Magaro, they're two characters as well. But I think it's crucial. You know, you need that for a movie like this in order to function. You know, and to the movie's credit as well, it does that not just with Dano, but with all of the other supporting characters. But since Dano is kind of posited as the lead, and also just the fact that this is, God, I have to think, but this might be the first leading role that Dano has had. Because Dustin and I were talking about this with the Hall of Fame that we did the other day. That I think this might be Dano's first leading role since Swiss Army Man. I want to say, I don't think he's had a leading role since. I mean, I could be wrong because Love and Mercy, which he's technically, I label him as a co-lead for that movie. Love and Mercy is 1 year before Swiss Army Man. That's January of 2015.
I mean, let's see. The
Oakjaw,
Guilty had a
2016,
Oakjaw. He was
supporting.
one of the men.
Yeah,
I
he's
guess
supporting.
Yeah,
The
'cause then
Batman's
it's
supporting because he's the Riddler.
the Fablemans. He's
The
a
Fableman's supporting.
supporting, and then the Dumb Money. I could see
Yeah.
where he
Well, I mean,
is
Dumb Money's an
that
ensemble cast, but it all revolves around him. So
on
to me,
him.
he
Yeah.
is the lead of that movie. Not to mention the fact that just if you look at his entire career, Dano hasn't had a whole lot of leading parts throughout his entire career. You know, you look at two of his biggest and most impressive performances that really kind of announced him to the world, Little Miss Sunshine and There Will Be Blood. He's supporting in those movies, you know?
Mhm.
He's
The only other movie I can think of where he's actually like the lead in is like Ruby Sparks. But that
which
was
one is
back in
that?
2012 where he was like, it's the one where he's like an author and he writes like the perfect girl.
I don't remember this one.
Yeah, this is a really cute rom
Yeah.
fantasy.
Okay. Oh,
Mi
wow. I've never heard. Oh, shit. Jonathan Dayton and Valerie Ferris, the directors of Little Miss Sunshine, and written by Zoe Kazan. Look at that.
Yeah,
I've
it's
never
like
heard
a
of that.
very, very cute movie. If you haven't seen it, go watch
Wow.
it.
Yeah, Dev, I have not heard anything about this movie.
Yeah,
That's
go watch
interesting.
that. I
Okay.
recommend that
But
one.
that's 2012, so that predates Love and Mercy and Swiss Army Man.
Yeah.
So, yeah, Dano, I like Dano. He's had an interesting career for sure, and it's very tricky for an actor to build the reputation that he does with primarily supporting parts. You know, it's
And he
very
kills
rare.
it with all the supporting parts because
he
I'm
does.
thinking about it.
But that's
He
what
does so good.
right. And like I said, Dustin and I were talking about this a lot on our Hall of Fame, where it's like he again, like there really isn't another actor out there where again he's so much. So I feel like so much of like what makes a lot of actors is them being likable. And Dano has almost built a career on playing like guys who, to quote Dustin, you kind of just want to punch in the face, you know?
And so unlikable and
Yes.
kind of creepy, thinking of the ways like the Riddler and how he was in Prisoners.
Right.
And
as Dustin pointed out, sorry to cut you off, about Ruby Sparks. Yeah, Little Miss Sunshine director is good movie. Yeah. So there you go. So Dustin, actually, I think you might have mentioned this offhanded to me before, because now that we talked about it, it is starting to ring a bell just a little bit. But yeah, but it was really nice to see him in another leading role, and he crushed it. He just crushed it so hard, because I might be wrong, but is this the first time that Paul Dano has played like a regular guy? You know, because you know the Fablemans, that movie's like really, really over sentimental, a little bit gushy. You know, I feel like all the time he's always playing like a little bit nervous, or a little bit nervy, or a little bit neurotic, or like he's kind of going over the top with the unlikability. You know,
he's like kind of quirky, even in Swiss Army Man.
Swiss Army Man, he's a little bit quirky and off kilter because of how he has to react to Radcliffe. You know, Love and Mercy, he's playing Brian Wilson, who's like in the peak of his like experimental phase, you know?
Yeah.
I think this is kind of like the most normal that Paul Dano has ever been.
The down to earth character he's
like really down to earth. Like Pete Davidson is way more like, I mean, if you just want to contrast them, and like again, like two people that I never in a million years would have pegged to be playing siblings in a movie. But
when they look nothing alike and they're siblings,
look nothing alike, they act nothing alike. And Pete Davidson has kind of gotten to the point where, like, I don't want to say it, but like Pete Davidson is kind of one of those people who kind of plays himself in everything, you know? I wouldn't exactly call him somebody with a lot of range, versus Dano has like so much range with like just in his pinky. But it kind of works, their dynamic. It really, really does. Like, you buy them as brothers, you know, and especially their family dynamic, like when they're with like their parents, their dad, who also in like Clancy Brown, who's just been popping up in like these random like one-off parts and like all these incredible movies. He has another tiny part in Promising Young Woman, and he just absolutely kills it, you know?
Yeah, and I love somebody who you haven't mentioned.
And also somebody who we haven't mentioned as part of the cast as well, who is also great, who I feel like we also haven't seen it forever, Shailene Woodley.
Shailene Woodley is really good too.
Yeah, as Paul Dano's
She's just enough that balances out his character and his emotions, because they do have a daughter. It's the family, and they balance well off each other, where they have those one-on-one conversations. And
and Dustin, as for Girl Next Door, Colette, I still can't believe that that's actually his name in that movie. That's one of the greatest things ever.
I forgot about
Colette's
that.
The only thing I'll say about that is because he's so like kind of silent and mute, he comes off as like, you know, just like, you know, like a little nerdy. That's so like, it is normal per se, yes, but I guess it's not in the sense of like, it's like this is like the first like regular, just like working like down to earth kind of a guy that I feel like Dano has ever played before, right? You know, so and it's just the fact that he pulls it off. Dane DeHaan, was he funny? I don't know. How would you describe that, Kristen?
I don't think he's funny. He's kind of like.
Look, I'll say this: the interactions between him and Ramos come off as funny because of like how relatable they were, specifically like just like from like a COVID standpoint of it's like, okay, like there are a lot of us who worked those types of jobs and had the types of bosses that Dane DeHaan played, where it's like, oh, stick to the rule. So like it comes off
the rule book, and
right. Oh, it comes off as funny in terms of his presentation, but he's not giving an outwardly comedic performance like most of the cast.
Yeah, I think he is there just to be like the mirror image of the retail boss.
Right.
And I think him and Anthony Ramos do a good job of going back off of forth of each other.
Yeah,
especially
they got
when
a good
they're
dynamic. And then when Ramos like kind of gets to stick it to him at the end, I thought that was perfect.
With the little TikTok dances, because that was a big thing. Because, you know, we all had TikTok.
And also, sorry to keep cutting you off.
No, it's okay.
Bringing things out of my brain. The first movie to actually effectively utilize TikTok. It's the first one I've ever seen.
One of them that really like captures TikTok really well and that cultural subtext of it. And the best movie that uses Savage, I must say that. I was like, I wasn't a huge Megan Thee Stallion fan. Like, I was like, all right, Savage, I know the song from TikTok, whatever. Yeah, I was like, this is really good how they use it in the movie.
Right, and I wasn't even, put it this way, I wasn't even on TikTok at that time. I didn't start using TikTok until Christmas of that year, and I even was familiar with it. And so, Dustin, answer your question, is it totally not a comedy?
It's a dramedy.
It is a dramedy. It is a true dramedy. Like put it this way: nobody in the movie is outwardly going for the joke, but the movie does have plenty of comedic moments. I will say that the source of a lot of the straight comedy in the movie comes from Pete Davidson, just kind of being himself, and like he has a lot of like funny moments. But the movie itself, to me, like I don't classify it as a comedy. Like I put like Dustin, just to put this in perspective, when I put when I nominated Paul Dano for our NIFA nominations that we do every year, I put him in drama. I put all the cast members for drama for this movie. Because
I think though, I see this movie getting like a nomination for
I definitely see
the
for Golden Globes them putting
Globe
this in comedy for sure. But
in the
like, it's
comedy
not
section,
really a comedy to me.
but this is going to see with the Matt Damon situation where
Right.
Matt Damon was nominated for best comedy musical for The Martian. This is the same thing we're going to see Paul Dano in for that, I think, because they're going to given the fact that this year has been kind of interesting with that, I think they're going to get I could see the Golden Globe community giving it to him.
Yeah, I'm with that as well. Now, as far as this movie's handling of the subject matter, like kind of like how it progressed, I was really, really fascinated just in terms of it, like kind of playing out showing how the events played out and essentially having to condense 6 months. Well, what is it? About like 6 to 8 months kind of into one, like about a 2-hour narrative, and like the movie really flies by. There doesn't feel like there's an ounce of wasted space, just when I feel like there are certain scenes that are like starting to go on a little long, like it cuts to a different sequence as well. I think the movie does a really, really good job of it. And like, especially like I said, because Craig Gillespie, just as a director, how he handled that with the editing process as well, I really thought that he did a pretty fantastic job with this as well. And honestly, like I said, I was expecting this movie to be like within like my top 15, top 20 favorites of the year. I was not expecting to love it as much as I did. Like, but I remember like the movie kind of like slowly won us over to by the time we were like kind of like, we were going along with like all the different euphemisms and the little one-liners that they were throwing out, like what is it, like Diamond Mafia or something like that. Like what was the one-liner that you dropped at the beginning of the episode that I already forgot about because I'm terrible.
Chicken tendies about the chicken tendies.
The chicken tendies references. Like it was kind of like one of those types of movies. It was a quotable movie,
Yeah, and I just want to bring up, going back to the editing, I just wanted to click on it now because I was like saying to myself, I wonder how this director is associated with anything. This editor has worked with David Fincher. His name's Kirk Baxter, and he worked on the Social Network.
He's the editor for the Social Network. There you go. It all makes sense now.
Yeah,
I wouldn't be surprised. Wait, okay. Now I'm looking up The Big Short. I want to see if he edited The Big Short as well.
It doesn't show up on his.
That would be too big of a coincidence. Okay, no, I did not edit The Big Short. That was edited by a different guy. But that would be too big of a coincidence.
I mean, the man would know how to make great movies about Wall Street and anything of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dustin, to answer your question right here, who else would be in? I'm trying to remember. I think I nominated Pete Davidson. But it would probably just be Dano and Davidson, just as far as individual cast members. It's more so the power of the cast itself, and just the fact that I just love how each person like worked kind of within their individual roles within the movie. But Seth Rogen, I will say, as far as giving primarily a dramatic performance, like he really doesn't have any jokes in the movie. He does have like a pretty compelling part, because Seth Rogen, he kind of has like a thankless part because he kind of has to play like a really unlikable, like kind of schlubby, like idiot on Wall Street. Like he's definitely like shown to be like kind of on the dumber side and kind of having to depend a little bit on D'Onofrio and Offerman. D'Onofrio, I think actually plays the owner of the Mets as well. What's it called? I would not agree, unfortunately, with that. I don't give it. I can't give Cruella credit. I can't. I just
don't mind Cruella. I'll
give him the episodes of Pam and Tommy.
I love that show. I love that show. I thought that show was. That show was one of my favorites of last year.
I wasn't as big a fan of that as everybody else was, but like I understood why it got the love that it did. I actually, in a weird way, think that Seth Rogen was the best part about that show because that was because that was like the first time I'm like, oh shit, Rogen could like actually do drama, which I really hadn't seen from him before,
Yeah. And I loved everybody in that show. I thought Lily James was great, Sebastian Stan. And it's so interesting to see that some of these people that Craig has worked in the past signed on to do it, like Sebastian Stan, for an instance, and
Steve Jobs. That's another one that's like right in the same vein of these movies as well.
Yeah, Steve Jobs is actually a really good, interesting comparison to it. And I also want to go back to the fact that you mentioned maybe Pete Davidson getting like.
Well, I just meant for like our personal nominations. I'm not talking about nominations in general. Yeah,
okay,
nominations wise, if anybody were to get nominated for this, like outside of Golden Globes, I would be shocked, but also really, really excited because I don't know why. I just have a bad feeling that when it comes to, I think it came out too early. I think this is gonna get overlooked. I'm hoping it doesn't. But
hope it gets at least the recognition for writing, because I think the writing is really,
writing
really
absolutely,
good.
because these two script writers, I'm gonna pull it up because because again, these were the two whose script was selected for it. But yeah, these two writers, their names are Lauren Schuker Blum and Rebecca Angelo. Like, they crushed it. Like, surprisingly, like, again, really biting, but not not as comedic, you know?
And I could see it for adapted, since, like I mentioned earlier, this is
Yeah,
based on the book.
definitely.
I could see this getting nominated for that, but I don't know about anything else because, like
Yeah,
you had mentioned, it was so early, and I guess depends if we don't get any more strikes or
yeah.
still
Fingers crossed.
logging on still, this could have a chance of getting nominated
Which would
more
be
if we
awesome.
don't
Which would
see
really
anything
be
else,
awesome.
which
Like,
would
because
be
honestly,
great.
I already know, I already have a bad feeling that I'm gonna like this movie more than a majority of the other movies that are gonna come out during Oscar time. Like, I have a feeling I'm gonna like this more than Maestro. I'm gonna like this more than Priscilla. I'm gonna like this more than Ferrari. I'm gonna like this more than what are some of the other ones that I'm currently blanking on that are set to come out around Oscar
Eileen.
time? Eileen is TBD. The only ones that are TBD for me right now are Eileen and Saltburn. Those are the only ones that I'm like
Saltburn?
kind of
Okay, I'm so excited about Saltburn.
Saltburn, because Emerald Fennell kicked ass so hard
That
with
was my
Promising
favorite
Young Woman,
movie of
which was
2020.
such an unexpected surprise in the best way possible and the perfect way to wrap up 2020. That, like, there's
Yes.
no way that I can't be super excited. That so and to answer your question, yes, this is absolutely not nearly as comedic as The Big Short.
No,
The Big
not
Short
as
was
comedic.
outwardly laugh out loud funny at points. This was not that. This was not that at all.
There are comedic moments, but if I were to pick which one is funnier out of the two,
The Big Short, no
it's Big
question.
Short.
No question.
So
Yeah.
but there's no wrong. There's just still fun, I think, in Dumb Money, which Craig does bring to the film and make it very interesting. But if you're
Well, I mean, you look at what he did with I, Tonya. I, Tonya is another one that is way funnier than this movie. But the difference is that I, Tonya, unlike this movie, is actually going and is actually going for the comedy, you know, because they're expressing with how ridiculously insane that story was, you know, and just they're not going outwardly for the laugh, but they're just letting the ridiculousness of the subject matter kind of propel you through it, you know, and the fact that there were certain dumb characters. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So, and as far as the release dates,
Tonya is great.
Right, and as far as the release dates coming, that is true. You know, again, there have been a lot of movies that have been coming out recently, but it's always it's not really a thing of where it's any movie can come out at any time and get awards buzz. It has to come out at just the right moment and get the right amount of momentum. Like, you're kind of seeing
Oscar season, and I feel like that happens more October. You know,
exactly. It's always October through December. Like, I was going through the list of movies last year, and last year there was kind of an exception because there were two movies last year because Everything Everywhere came out in March and Elvis was in June. But all the other movies that were nominated last year were all in that October to December ratio. Because sorry, I'm wrong. There's a third one, Top Gun as well. Top Gun was May, but yeah, Tar October, Banshees October, Fabelmans November, Avatar December, All Quiet on the Western Front was December, Triangle of Sadness was October, Women Talking was December, and what else am I missing?
So many.
They're all majority still released in that window, you know? So Past Lives is getting a momentum this year. Grand Budapest, I thought Grand Budapest was a November release. I'm probably wrong about that. It might have been summer because I didn't
I thought it was March.
It was?
Of 2014.
Okay. Grand Budapest. Oh shit, no, you're right. March of 2014. Wow. Okay, that's interesting. But yeah, but the point being is that those are always the exceptions. It's never the majority of the movies that get nominated are still majority release. I feel like between October and December. You know, that's still the prime date and window. And if you look at all the movies that are being posited for Oscars right now, it's all because again, Killers, October, Saltburn, November, Maestro, December. What's it called? Priscilla gets the wide release in November. You know, all of those movies. So you basically, and it's not just that. It's just the fact that September in general is always a weird month when it comes to movie release dates, because when it comes to movie releases in general, because it's people are going back to school, you know, not as many people are going to the theater. September, I always factor it in as it's there are always like 3 months of the year that I kind of block off. It's like, okay, this is like my break from the movies month because there's just like really nothing to watch. And it's always August, September, and April. It's always those 3 months.
I also want to point something out because I was just curious because I remember going to see The Social Network in theaters.
Right.
So Social Network came out in September 24th, 2010 at the New York Film Festival.
Okay, but I thought it didn't open wide. Right, it opened wide in October.
1st of 2010. So that you can say kind of still is in that,
Right, it's in that fall window, but see that one I factor in. It's the festival release. That's not what happened really with Dumb Money. Dumb Money gets the Toronto release. It got the TIFF open, but it was always originally set to open wide at the end of September. It wasn't until recently that they did the thing where they opened it limited for the 2-week run because it was originally supposed to open wide this coming weekend, you know? But now they pushed it to the first weekend of October.
Right. Jeez.
Yeah. What's it called? But yeah, so as far as, like I said, back to the movie itself, this is a movie that, again, was not expected to enjoy as much. And again, it's one of those movies where it wins you over by the end. It wins you over with its effortless heart and charm and like the can-do attitude of the characters and the fact that like it really like it's kind of crazy. But like in a modern day scenario where everything is so cynical, it is one of those few instances of it where you find yourself like actually rooting for the characters to triumph. And some of them do, some of them don't, right? Because it's one of those things where the real life elements of it almost what's it called? Almost don't matter, you know? Because you're so invested and wrapped up and interested in all of those characters and everything that's going on with them that you almost you don't even care, you know? And it's like obviously, a lot of those people we didn't know what happened, and really at the end of the day only one of them got away with like all the money, and obviously we saw that like similar to how The Big Short ended. It's like none of the hedge funds really suffered. I mean, the one closed its doors, but other than that, it's like the Wall Street guys, they're still doing a lot of the same skeevy behind the scenes practices and getting away with it scot-free, especially like the biggest moment to me was when Sebastian Stan when we did the thing, you remember, I don't remember, like, I feel like this day is going to be like a national holiday soon, the day that Robin Hood shut down.
Yeah.
And nobody could place bets. I remember that was a huge deal. And I think that's when, like, it got my attention, when I'm like,
that was surprising. Because I remember even when we were talking with the end of the movie, my fiance was with us when we went to go see it. And we looked at the stock for Robin, and it's so low nowadays. It's like they're getting the taste of their medicine still.
Yeah, they definitely got to taste their medicine. And you want to talk about just like, again, scenes that like they're not like shot as direct comedy scenes, but the absurdity of it is just so great. The montage where Sebastian Stan, right, his character is being interviewed by Musk.
I love that scene.
by Portnoy. Oh, it's perfection.
It's so good. I was
so awkwardly just not knowing what to say. Oh, it's perfect.
It's so good. Because I mean, Dave Portnoy is Dave Portnoy, and I just love the scene that they cut like out, the real Van and put it with, hit with Dave, and it's so good. And
it's so great. And then Portnoy's just tearing him to shreds afterwards, calling him a liar and a weasel, saying he doesn't believe a word that came out. It was perfection.
I haven't seen it, but I want to know what Portnoy thinks of him being in the movie with Sebastian.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm assuming that he gave the consent, obviously, to have.
I know he gave the consent, but now that it's released, I guess he can't talk about it yet because it's the strike still, so I guess.
Well, but Portnoy's not in the union.
But I guess he can. I guess he can. I was just I want to know, Dave, if you're watching,
listen,
give us the thoughts.
Dave Portnoy can do whatever he wants. Dave Portnoy only ever does whatever he wants, as we well know. He bought back Barstool for $1, which is I still am wildly baffled by that.
That's amazing, though.
I think the biggest takeaway from this is it's like I think also another thing that this movie touched on, and like, oh my god, I feel like we can talk about this for hours. But one of the biggest things that I feel like this one touched on was how it got like this was the event, this was the moment that like got people our age and our generation invested in like finance and stuff and stocks, which I feel like that was a big moment because I feel like not really a whole lot of people our age really were invested or even knew how much the stock market worked. And if we didn't have some knowledge, we really didn't want to get invested in it because it was like the idea of gambling. And this is kind of the moment that showed us, oh no, the little guys, we can get involved and we can start to own stocks. And I just know that there were like a ton of people who are now like fully invested in like stocks and EFTs. And that's also when you saw the NFT movement really, really take off. And, you know, all the big investment in the big interest in Bitcoin and crypto,
oh my gosh,
and all of that. Yeah, this is the thing that started all of that. And kind of seeing like, it kind of makes you realize, just how big of an impact. This is way bigger than I feel like people are making it out to be. And I feel people writing this off as like, oh, it's the GameStop stock movie. It's like, nah, this is kind of an important one. And I don't say that a lot because I feel like so many movies are trying to be important without earning the right to be important. And I'm like, nah, this one earns it. This one gets it for sure.
Yeah. And it's also earns the respect of people who are on Reddit.
Right?
A lot.
Right? Yeah.
So I said this is pretty much Reddit.
Talk about that.
Movie.
What is it that you said that this movie was about after the fact, you know?
Yeah, I mean, everybody's like, a lot of people are into Reddit, and my fiance loves reading Reddit. He loved it so much. He was like, knowing all the memes, like Craig got on the Reddit and read everything. He got it all. He snapped it. He's like, all right, this is Reddit. I can do this.
Right.
And like so invested with that. I was like, it captures that aspect to a T.
Yes. Not to mention, I've said, like I said, this is the first for a lot of movies. This is like I said, this is it's the first movie to actually like present to be about like real world events like so recently. It's the first movie to actually utilize TikTok well. Not to mention that, honestly, you're right, Dustin. Between this, Air, Blackberry, Beanie Bubble, Tetris, this is the year of brand movies. But the other thing that I think this movie does so well, it is the thing that I have been criticizing Hollywood for years now, for years, literally. And this movie finally captured the internet and how people interface with the internet in probably the most accurate way possible. Because so much of the time you have these dumb horror movies and it shows people interacting with the internet. And it's like, this is not how people interact with the internet. This is not how the internet works. And they finally got it right. I feel like this gives validation to Redditors, to YouTubers, to podcasters, people who are often just kind of, lumped in as all being incels when that's really not. I think it gives validity to like the free speech movement that's kind of been like you've been seeing generating online.
Yeah.
Like I said, the biggest thing to me, I think this is like the first mainstream movie to like be mainstream about podcasters as well, which just gives validity to us as well. So like, that's another reason why I feel like we gotta promote this movie so hard as well.
Yeah,
is because this is a movie that speaks to us personally.
Yeah, it does a really good job speaking to this current generation of young adults, I must say.
Right.
It does a really great job. I feel like David Fincher did a really great job with
the social network. But even the social network, it's been 13 years since that movie, and I feel like that movie was speaking so much to millennials, and I feel like now, like, we've kind of taken that spot. So this is kind of our social network, if you think about it, It really is.
Yeah. And then I also want to acknowledge one thing, why I think pretty much Paul Dano is a really great casting choice for this film. It's the fact that there were some things with the Riddler's character that reminded me of Paul's character of Keith because of the social aspects. Because
and that was
he was saying, "Go follow my page, hey followers." I'm
exactly,
just like,
and like the way that the Riddler was like operating on the dark web and how that was like such a crucial part of that plot. Again, like that one's more focused on like the comic book element. But you're right, you're 100% on the money there. There. See, I just did the other part of that pun there. Yeah, no. Honestly, this movie was great. Like it really was. It was a very, very satisfying surprise. I was expecting to enjoy this, and I ended up loving it. This is my number 3 of the year right now. I think the only movies that I have above this are Guardians 3 and Oppenheimer still.
This is definitely going in good. I have a feeling this is going to end up in my top 10 for sure.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed it. This is just as good as I thought Tonya was, because Tonya was one of the movies I watched during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And what a movie I wish I watched sooner.
Wait, you didn't see Tonya when it first came out?
No, not right away. Because I wanted to see it. But given the
that was another one where
nobody wanted to see.
Well, that was another one where it's like, again, where part of the what I feel like what made that movie was the surprise factor, where it's like, oh, it's a Tonya Harding biopic. It's like, well, of all people, it's like, why is
that
she
was
getting
the
a biopic?
point.
But then like the way that movie is structured in terms of how it tells its story, it's so unlike anything that had made before, that had been made beforehand. It was just so invigorating. It really truly was a massive surprise that came out of nowhere.
So good.
And I'm hoping that could kind of happen with this movie. You know, once it gets the wide release and once more people become aware of it. You know, like I feel like I'm wondering, I'm like, oh, why is it so quiet? I'm like, oh, because it's so limited. I keep forgetting we saw it like so early and in advance, you know, like we were supposed to have Dustin on tonight, and then the movie hasn't opened by Dustin yet, and I completely forgot. I'm like, oh shit, this movie doesn't open for widespread audiences for another 2 weeks, which is. And I'm hoping that it does get the attention it deserves, because it's one of the few movies that's come out this year that like actually deserves the hype, you know?
Yeah, and right now, it's still growing, because right now it's sitting about almost close to $3 million. It's $2 million right now at the box office. So once, I guess, word of mouth comes in, and then, we see that coming in more, I think it'll have a good, strong chance. Not as well as I don't think Sony was hoping it would be, but there's a chance for this movie to do really well in the end.
Yeah, definitely. I'm with you there. So I just wanted to answer a couple more comments before we wrap that up. GZDR Forever on Twitch is asking, can the Leo DiCaprio Kills the Flower Moon get a nomination even though it's on streaming? Does it have to be in theaters even if it's one day to get a vote? It is actually getting a full theatrical campaign. It will be in theaters for several months, not just one day before it goes to streaming on Apple TV+.
This is like the same deal like Christopher Nolan did with this movie.
Pretty much, exactly. So they will be getting, it will not be like a Netflix situation where those movies are in theaters for like a week just to make them eligible for Oscars, and then they immediately pop up on streaming. No, these will be getting a full-on theatrical run. They will be this movie, and then Napoleon, which opens in November with Joaquin Phoenix, will both be in theaters. Those will be Apple TV original movies that will be opening in theaters. That will then have very long theatrical runs. AJ, what's going on? Good to see you again. It's been a minute. And Dustin, one last thing. What's it called? Save your number one spot for the Sam Bankman Freed movie. I don't know what that is. And then Dustin, Jerry Seinfeld is directing a Pop-Tarts movie that's going to Netflix. And also another one as well about this. Another one that you forgot, Dustin. And
Sam Bankman Friedman is the one about the Bitcoin thing.
Oh, okay.
Is that the guy from Bitcoin?
Maybe
cryptocurrency. It was the founder of CEO of the cryptocurrency exchange.
Yeah, so that's the crypto thing. But the Cheetos movie, the one that Eva Longoria directed, that went right on was it Cheetos or I think it's Cheetos, that went on directly to Hulu. So that's another one that came out. Not Bitcoin, FTX. Okay, got it.
Yeah.
FTX, same thing. They're all.
I don't get it. I don't invest in them. So
listen, it's all online fake currency, you know. So like, it's all the same to me.
Yeah, to me, I don't believe in it, so don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't take my word though. But you do what you want. Your money.
Listen, with that being said, like I said, we kind of already gave our final thoughts on it. But like I said, the point being that when this opens wide, go see it. This is like one of the first movies that I've like ever like reviewed. What's it called? This is like one of the first movies. What's it called? That. This is one of the first movies that I've actually seen early before it opens wide. But when it opens wide, definitely go see it. You guys will not regret it. Go see it in the theater too. It's a great cast. It's a great premise. It's really invigorating. It speaks to I feel like it speaks to a lot of people that are like specifically in that 20 that like late teens to early 30s age range that this movie is directly speaking to. And for me, I still haven't even like figured it out. I don't remember what I rated on Letterboxd. It's between 4.5 and a 5 for me, but it's all the way up there. It's really, really good. I really enjoyed it. Kristen, your final thoughts and star ratings?
Okay, so my star ratings, I'm giving this maybe a 5 out of 5. I'm giving it an A at the moment. So definitely one of the best of the year. I highly recommend it. It's fun. It's entertaining. And I really enjoyed it. This is one of Craig's best works, and I can't wait to see what he does next because I really enjoyed the director.
Absolutely. Yeah, Craig Gillespie, man. Please keep making more movies like this, please, because these are when you thrive. You know, I obviously, again, much respect to his career. He's had a very, very interesting and different career than most directors that get to this spot. But I feel like it's like every time he makes a movie like this, every time a movie he makes like an I, Tonya, you know, I think he kicked ass with directing the pilot of Physical, which is still probably the most underrated Apple TV Plus show.
Still shout out to Pam and Tommy. Still love that.
Pam and Tommy as well. Like when he does stuff like this, that's when I think he's at his strongest, you know? So definitely keep doing, you know, keep sticking to the biopic stuff, the wacky biopic stuff. And I think, I think we'll have a home run eventually, you know? But yeah, so with that being said, Kristen, thanks for coming on again. This was an absolute blast. Can't wait to have you back on. Hopefully we'll be able to have you on sooner rather than later. I know we'll be having you on in October to talk about some festival movies that you and I will be getting to see early. I will be getting to see Priscilla, Ferrari, and December at New York Film Festival, and I will be talking about those movies as well. I'll be giving kind of like a preview of all of those movies in October when they all come out. And then I will be talking about them a little bit more when they open wide. You will be getting to see some. Unfortunately, I will not be reviewing A Haunting in Venice.
I did. If you want to go check out my review, it's on.
Yes, which in case plug. Yeah, I was about to say.
I'm going to say plug that.
Where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
They can follow me on TikTok at Miss Filmingo. I'm also available on Instagram, and I co-host a podcast with my best friend Mac. So shout out to Mac at the M&K Productions podcast. You can catch us there. We just did a Shrek retrospective, and coming up, we are doing a Jennifer Lawrence retrospective.
Nice, excellent, and of course, you can follow myself at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms. Be sure to follow the official Talking TV podcast across all platforms. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Twitch. Subscribe to us on YouTube, TikTok, X. I just said X. Twitter earlier. And Elon Musk is in this movie, so we can't be saying we can't be saying Twitter no more. It's officially X. We got to start incorporating that into our vocabulary. And it's like Sean said, we can't just say it like X. We have to say it like X. Like he's like X. You have to put like the emphasis.
Do you know what it makes me think of? Do you remember that sound that it was like in the theaters that went like?
Yes, like almost like the THX sound effect. Yes, like Lucasfilm. Kind of like that.
I feel like we need to start hearing that as X.
It's like sponsored by X,
That's what I was afraid, Dumb Money could show up by sponsored by X.
It's like it shows up like the Kool-Aid Man, where it's like you say X, and it's like if every time you don't say X properly, Elon Musk is just gonna like shoot a hologram into your room and just be like, it's X.
No.
However he says it.
No, a flashing lighting X from your own house.
Exactly. Yeah. Follow us on all of those platforms and more. This episode will be available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts tomorrow. And as always, people, 12 seasons in a short film, and watch more fucking movies. We'll see you guys next week with more of the Talking TV podcast. See ya.